Okay, let's get started. I would like each group to come up and make a very brief report back.
We're a technology group. Of course, being in a technology company employee, I mean, I wanted to add some value, but I couldn't. First of all, we were gathering a lot of information because we had such a little knowledge about this one, and then we tried to ask ourselves, what is the technological challenge, or maybe if there's some technologies that make this difficulty in around everything solved. Maybe ordinary people can join. And I'm trying to make some reference to computer. Windows PC, for example, Windows is a very complicated technology, but everyone knows that we can use it. We feel comfortable about using it. So same thing for Bitcoin. If there's some technology that came up that actually wipes out a lot of our concerns and then lack of understanding, maybe a lot more people can join, start using it. And then we explored some ideas in terms of how we can do that.
Yeah. Just a few additions, some bouncing questions back and forth in research. We know that there is a limited number of Bitcoins on the net, on the web. It's known to be 21 million, I believe, on the net. And the advantage is for the early adapters, basically, who came early and start mining for these and got them early. And the value for finding, it's like when you find a Bitcoin, you'll get a reward for it, which is 50 Bitcoin started. And then this value is starting to get less and less. Now it's 25. And then eventually in the future, it's going to be maybe 0. So the question is joining Bitcoin now with no technical information will give you an advantage or not? And then the second thing is about security. It's, of course, decrypted with a very high complex secured encryption, but that doesn't mean it's not hackable or it's the key cannot be open. So if I'm doing a transaction for a million Bitcoin, that's a very big risk if someone can find the key and get my money out. So these are technical issues I believe we found out.
But at least we can say that Bitcoin is very appealing and digital and virtual. At the same time, that we have our psychological concern and risks. But always, when something new happens, people are not accustomed to these things. So Bitcoin is something like a baby. So when the regulation or technology are developed and the security are protected, or the government are working on these things, I think that psychological issue should be broken by the technology. And this is our kind of wrap up.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the next group. This talks about price.
So we started off by talking a bit about the origins of Bitcoin and what it was used for originally, and we were kind of guessing, but I think it had a big presence on the Silk Road or the dark web, where originally like a large percentage of the Bitcoins in circulation were used for buying guns and drugs and killing people and stuff like that, which is quite an interesting origin for a currency. So probably lots of currencies originated in that way. So we were looking at the difference in demand and supply with Bitcoins as compared to other conventional currencies. The difference in the supply being that it reverts to a gold standard model where there's a finite mineable quantity of this, which for some reason has been rejected by the rest of the world. And the demand aspect of it historically being kind of slightly secretive, shady interactions on the web, and progressing into a sort of nerds MasterCard at the moment. but we don't know where it's going to go next. But so in terms of the demand, having this finite supply of it, we were discussing some of the problems associated with that being an inherently kind of deflating economy and people having to adjust in terms of kind of like a sticky wage problem, where if it's going to be deflating, then if it's a widespread currency, then people have to adjust to the idea of a deflating currency as opposed to one that's kind of ever inflating, and how that might be incorporated into kind of like future strategy for dealing with it. And then over here we were talking about the proportion of the currency used just kind of like held as an asset compared to what was trading, and how that is kind of what makes it inherently volatile. It's just guessing at which proportions of that are being used, because it's one of the most exciting things about it is it's kind of like a speculative currency instead of a more conventional one. Here you go, Pei.
You speak everything. Okay, so we're using bitcoins ideally supposed to be for currencies, but actually there's a lot of people using this as one of a stock, meaning like predicting the price and use that in investments. So that sort of make the purpose of being currency less and less. And if there's not many people using it, the purpose of being currency is going to disappear, and it's going to be another international stock that people play. So that really depends on that. Together with the cap of the limits of the bitcoins, like most currency in the world, every country produces it more and more each year, which keep everything go at the same levels. But if Bitcoin cap the limits, which means that physical actual currencies will go one direction and Bitcoin gonna stop, and that gonna create more trend of being less of a currencies, but being more of something that you trade and you like process for the being held as an asset instead of being currency, and that gonna really affect the price. And it's gonna keep on going up and up until everyone stop using it and just think it doesn't have any values, because if people just trading it and there's no actual market that it can be used, so you can't convert that back into actual objects, it's gonna die soon. Sorry.
Here's an enthusiast, so we'll see. But no offense, right? Okay. Okay, that's all right. That's all right. I think this is something new. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, concerning the legal issues
You could come here.
about the Bitcoin, we first had to a bit more understand what the Bitcoin is and how does it work. So a big part of the time we were discussing mainly about, okay, what is it, how it works, what are the transactions which are going on. And then we identified, or we were counseled that there are three major issues about regulation of Bitcoin. One concerns the anti-money laundering regulation, the second, the consumer protection, the third, taxes, and maybe the thing that you need to know your customer concerning the regulation or limitation of some businesses towards them. We identified like three major parties within the Bitcoin world, or which are the stakeholders. Those are the, let's say, custom seller and buyer. So those who really make the business and use the Bitcoin. Then there's the Bitcoin community, which somehow regulates itself. And there is the government, who just, for the moment, doesn't have the control over Bitcoins and over what's going on. So what we are speaking about is that the Bitcoin community was set up with some initial idea, rules, or mainly the system. Then there are those providers of payments who have some more rules concerning the transactions among or between the accounts of the users. But this Bitcoin world is kind of separate from sellers and buyers who actually execute the business between them as the contract within the legal regulation of their country or countries according to the treaties between those countries. So for the businesses between them, which applies mainly for the consumer protection, there are applicable the rules which would be applicable for any other deals. The thing is that they are free to set up the conditions of the deal. So they can decide, okay, the payment won't be done in money, but it will be done in bitcoins. And then this payment is not regulated, but once the parties agree that they already made the transaction of bitcoins, there is no national court who could just intervene if it happened or not. It's again in this Bitcoin community where it should be self-regulated. And then the government itself can only recognize Bitcoin as, like, it can say, okay, the transactions can be done also using other means than money, and then but it cannot control which means are used. And then it says, okay, the transaction or the contract was signed or the deal was done, so you need to follow the deal. And the deal must have been done within the national regulation. And it applies also for the tax issues. It's the same as if you were using cash. You cannot track cash very well. So it's very similar. So it's one of the means. So you only have to make your tax authority know that you did this business. So it's your accounting, which is applicable here. And the thing about anti-money laundering, it's again the same thing, that if you transfer the bitcoins, you need to exchange them for real money. So once a huge amount of real money appears on the market, then it's a sign that, okay, something happened. But it's only when the exchange from bitcoins to real money happens that the country should intervene.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let's go to the social. There are two social groups.
We didn't conclude anything because we tried to understand about Bitcoin, and we had some questions about Bitcoin. So what's the difference between Suica versus Bitcoin? Suica is centralized and only used in one country, but Bitcoin is multinational and it's not really centralized. It could be utilized well in the developing country. Homa-san explained about the example in Kenya, and we had Alberto, who lived in Africa for 2 years. So we talked about how it could be utilized in the developing country. Could be a good platform if they have an access to it. We talked about the money laundering issues. We also talked about the national security issue because if we utilize Bitcoin, economic sanction will not be working. Because I was talking about my experience of using Bitcoin just because of the economic sanction against Russia. We cannot use a credit card, MasterCard, Visa card due to the sanction, and because I was doing some business with Russians and some Thai and Vietnamese, we decided to use Bitcoin in order to exchange money. So we talked about the economic sanction risk, how each government would manage that, but we couldn't conclude anything because we don't have that much knowledge. And also we talked about the asset risk evaluation. Bitcoin is a high risk, high return, but also we need to think about the real money risk. When we talked about real money, we have country risks, as well as the exchange rate fluctuation. So when we evaluate these things, we can probably decide what would be the best currency for us to use, and it would be different from each person's case.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to the last group.
So ours was also a lot of speculation. We didn't really get to ask a lot of questions. So we really identified two user groups that use Bitcoin. So there are people that they're really two extremes, and currently there's no norm. So one of the user groups is people that want to or are speculative investing. So like Dan's group said, you know, we're not sure of the percentage of people that are using it to invest and keep and then trade later on. And then there are those people that are using it, as the other group just identified, to get around regulations and are somehow operating in like these shady businesses. However, we also feel that the best use of this currency could be in developing countries, but the level of infrastructure and the amount of technological knowledge you have at the moment is the biggest barrier to this, you know, becoming popular and succeeding in these different places. So, you know, a lot of the advantages was like opening up of the global market, so you no longer have to play with international exchange rates, and it would really make international markets, we think they're global now, but if this worked, they would be so much more fluid than they currently are. And it obviously releases like trade embargoes and things like that on countries. And then you have the benefits for the normal consumer who would come if everybody started using it. So lower commissions and all that. However, that appears on the negatives too. So obviously this is, like you said, very high risk. It's not regulated, so that can lead to many problems. Security is kind of debatable, although we kind of negated that point at the end. But the infrastructure at the moment is kind of one of the biggest barriers. I mean, quite a lot of us in this room are technical, and I think we still haven't got Bitcoin, and I think that is a big barrier to its success. And yeah, the potential to bring down national governments, if it did replace all currency, that's all your tax gone out the window unless it's properly regulated, and then goodbye national health services and fire services, and you know, your garbage is just going to stay on the street. So yeah, that's probably the biggest negative we have, bringing down of national governments. And then obviously for the normal user currently, it's big fluctuation if you come from a stable currency. However, I'm sure if you're from the Congo, it doesn't look that volatile. So those are the things we came up with.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, I hope that you have a little more knowledgeable about the good and bad, or the risk and reward of Bitcoin. And I thought it was very interesting because I think the technology has sort of broken down a lot of boundaries, and we often call it like an internet, you know, it's self-regulating. And probably Honma-san can talk a little bit about how the internet has evolved in a way, and you know how we now have Facebook and all these things, but it has taken a little while for us to come to that stage.
Let's think about TCP/IP 1993 or 1990. At that time, I sent pin to some place is quite a very basic protocol like TCP/IP existed before, but after that, SMTP, HTTP was developed, and website is developed, and there's Netscape, and Google and Facebook. All such technology is basically based on the very basic protocol, which is TCP/IP. And the Bitcoin is also similar to such protocol like TCP/IP. Bitcoin, like I said, it's a protocol. And if I compare it to Internet 1.0, this year is still 1993. So Bitcoin will have a killer application, which is like Netscape in 2 years. And it's going to grow exponentially like Internet 1.0. And personally, I believe that Bitcoin is Internet 2.0. It just started from 2009 and growing exponentially like this. So I guess that many advanced protocol will be developed, many applications will be developed, and it's quite unpredictable. Everybody is talking about such new possibilities, I mean, enthusiasts, but nobody in 1993 imagined about Google and Facebook. Therefore, it's not possible to predict future application of Bitcoin. But it's basic protocol, and we will see something truly disruptive, truly unimaginable, and it has very many opportunities. New industry has started with Bitcoin protocol.
Great, thank you very much. It seems like, judging from some of the advertising and news, he mentioned that we didn't have enough good materials or the articles or the papers in Japanese so far on Bitcoin. It has been taken as a sensational sort of topic. But it seems like these 3 days, more things are coming out in Japanese. And I think it's about time. It could be a very good timing for you to get to know some more sort of papers and reports on Bitcoin with a little more knowledge as to, it's not just sensational, speculative things. It may have a more, a little different future. So for that, if this session, even though we are sort of exploring a lot of things and we don't quite know what Bitcoin will offer us over the long run, I think it may, if it serves as a sort of a basic foundation for you to start thinking about the future implications of Bitcoin and the role of currency overall, I think it'll be a very good one, and I'd be very happy. And if you could join me in thanking Honma-san to tell us a little bit more about Bitcoin and enlighten us a little more. And probably he will be a billionaire in about 3 years. And if that's the case, we'll tell him when he becomes a billionaire. We were at that Davos Experience in Tokyo where you were a guest speaker, and probably he'll give you like 2 Bitcoins each. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Let me make two announcements. We'll have another session. The next session is May the 30th, and it's going to start at 7:30. And what we're going to do is, we do have the aging problem, and the rest of the world, even though Japan is the fastest aging country in the world, a lot of other countries are aging very, very quickly. And we're going to think of several possible aged people, one living in Tokyo, another living in the countryside and so forth. And we're going to try to figure out what are the technological solutions we can provide for each one of these people. So it'll involve a little bit of role play. It'll involve a lot of creative thinking. So that's May the 30th. And June 18th is the next session. And we wanted to talk a little bit about the identity of being Japanese. So the question would be, do you want to be Japanese again for those who are Japanese, if you are reborn? And for those who are not Japanese, do you want to be Japanese when you're reborn? So that's the question that we would like to ask. And we're going to try to do a little bit of role play. And this is going to be a fun session. So we have today was a pretty serious subject, with us not knowing much. So we got some basic sort of knowledge. But the next two sessions will be much more sort of like lighter subject with more actions and role plays. So we'll start at 7:30 because a lot of people I hear have trouble getting here by 7 o'clock. And rather than having the separate get-together or networking event, we'll have just a drinks right after the session. And if you want to go somewhere else after that and to get some food, you're free to do. But we're not going to organize any get-together per se. But we're going to charge 4,000 yen for this event next time, including the drinks. So, but that's going to be done before, it's going to be done by 10 or 10:30 or so. Another publicity, I am running the Global Agenda Seminar for 6 months at Academy Hills. And it says you can become a global leader at Roppongi Hills in 6 months or something, which seems to be a little bit of overblown public relations. But there is a brochure there, and it talks about it has some comments from the past participants, and it also has a list of guest speakers this time, one of whom is a music composer. So we are trying to have a little bit of a different variety. And if you want to find out what it's like to participate in Global Agenda Seminar, I run this Taiken Zemi, sort of trial session on May the 16th. And I think it's being, the seats are filled up very, very quickly. So if you want to register, go to their website or pick up one of those brochures and come and join us. But this Davos Experience in Tokyo is supposed to be, has been designed so that it's easier to join this type of discussion, because this costs 250,000 yen for 6 months, and you have to make a commitment for 6 months, which is a major commitment. And so your time as well as money will fly if you join this. But for this, we have 4,000 yen, and you can do a lot of things on the monthly basis. So that's the differentiation. So we're trying to differentiate two seminars. So that's it for my part. Thank you very much for coming today, even though it's been raining and stuff. And for those who want to join us for networking session, we still have one tonight at Arc Hills Cafe, but it's going to cost you some money. Thank you. Good night.